Then the man advanced and deliberately dealt him a frightful blow on the nose. All the pain he had endured was as nothing compared to the exquisite agony of this. With a roar that was almost lion-like in its ferocity, he again hurled himself at the man. But the man, shifting the club from right to left, coolly caught him by the underjaw, and at the same time wrenching downward and backward. That club was a revelation. It was his introduction to the reign of primitive law, and he met the introduction halfway. The facts of life took on a fiercer aspect. The villain is a vindictive man in a red sweater, belting a dog with a club. Our hero is a St. Bernard and Shepherd dog named Buck. The author is Jack London. The story is Call of the Wild, 1903. John Griffith London, born 1876, San Francisco, more commonly known as Jack London, was the American author who penned The Call of the Wild, 1903, Seawolf, 1904, White Fang, 1906, Iron Heel, 1908, and Martin Eden, 1909, as well as many others. He rose from working-class struggle to fame and fortune with all the flaming splendor of a meteor, with the ferocity of a husky underdog biting and scraping his way to the top of the pack. At age 9, he was already an animal lover, having a little dog called Rollo. At age 9, he also fell in love with stories when he read the novel Signa by Ouida. Jack's mother was Flora Wellman. Flora was a music teacher and a spiritualist. His stepfather was Jack London, a disabled war veteran. His biological father was William Cheney, an astrologer who actually denied the parentage when the young boy wrote a letter to him. Heartbroken from this rejection, Jack left school and went to the Klondike during the gold rush. Jack London worked various labor jobs: Hickmott's Cannery, 12 to 18 hours a day, the California Fish Patrol, a sealing schooner bound for Japan, and a jute mill. He found a sympathetic librarian and also the owner of a saloon, John Hanold, and he told them of his dream to become a writer. The librarian and bar owner helped Jack with books and money to get into college. London attended the University of California in 1896 and left in 1897 due to financial hardship, and he never graduated. This agonizing struggle of crawling over broken glass and enduring insults to establish his literary career is described in his half-fictional novel Martin Eden. Working these hard labor jobs was fertile soil to encourage his socialist sympathies, shown later in his novel The Iron Heel. While visiting this saloon, Jack would meet the masterful Captain Alexander McLean. This strong, intelligent, yet cruel man would inspire his antagonist Larson in his novel Seawolf. London's work could be classified as American realism and naturalism. Some of his literary and philosophical influences include Friedrich Nietzsche, the philosopher, Herbert Spencer, the zoologist, his friend George Sterling, the poet, as well as Egertson Young, the Canadian teacher, missionary, and author. Perhaps the greatest of London's works is the famous Call of the Wild, with its starkly sketched-out narratives, its lyrical yet succinct descriptions, and its luminous characters that make themselves felt and remembered. Buck, our canine protagonist, is rescued by the frontiersman, the intrepid and wise John Thornton. But in spite of this great love he bore John Thornton, which seemed to bespeak the soft, civilizing influence, the strain of the primitive, which the Northland had aroused in him, remained alive and active, faithfulness and devotion. Things born of fire and roof were his. Yet he retained his wildness and wiliness. He was a thing of the wild, come in from the wild to sit by John Thornton's fire, rather than a dog of the soft Southland stamped with the marks of generations of civilization. Because of his very great love, he could not steal from this man, but from any other man in any other camp, he did not hesitate an instant, while the cunning with which he stole enabled him to escape detection. Our narrative follows the St. Bernard and Shepherd dog named Buck, at first nestled in the bosom of civilization. He's the beloved pet of Judge Miller in the pleasant Santa Clara Valley. Enter our antagonist, the gardener Manuel, with the responsibility of a wife, children, and an unfortunate addiction to playing Chinese lottery. His meager wage is not enough to pay for all these burdens. Manuel treacherously abducts Buck and sells him as a slave, a sled dog to run the government mail out to the gold prospectors. We meet many characters in our journey: the nasty slave drivers, the man in the red sweater, Perrault and Francois, the sled dogs, Curly the innocent, Spitz the bully, Dave the morose, Solex the One-Eyed, Dolly the Doctor, Pike the Malingerer, and Billy the Good-Natured. We meet more sled dog runners. Hal, Charles, and Mercedes. They are reckless and ignorant and a danger to everyone on the trail. The Independent Hunters, the Yeehaw Indians, and of course John Thornton, with his good men and his loyal dogs. Now, the theme concerns two types of laws: the law of love, fellowship, and property, and the law of club and fang. Buck dwells in the town with Judge Miller under the law of love and fellowship. Then, because of Manuel's treachery, he is enslaved by the sled dog runners in the wilderness. Here reigns the law of club and fang. Passing into the keeping of John Thornton, Buck returns into the law of love and fellowship. After this, he ventures into the wilderness of the frontier. Here again is the law of club and fang. But this time Buck runs at the head of the pack, and he is the victor and not a victim. Hence, our hero has traveled full circle, and he has ascended into the wisdom of both dog and wolf. Jack London was an integral member of the art circle called The Crowd. This circle was a bohemian circle of close friends sharing socialist views and love for literature, art, music, and journalism. He also attended the Bohemian Grove secret society meetings. Jack was friends with the poet George Sterling, who was also a part of The Crowd. George Sterling was a poet whose work may be classified as comicism, dark romanticism, and bohemianism. Sterling was famed for his poem A Wine of Wizardly, 1903, and for his play Everyman, 1917. He attended St. Charles College but received no degree, attended the College of Physics and Surgeons but received no degree. Sterling would marry Caroline Rand, who was also part of The Crowd. Dark romanticism is a literary subgenre, reflecting popular fascination with the irrational, the demonic, and the grotesque. Edgar Allan Poe is the best example of this genre. Bohemianism is a social and cultural movement away from orthodox social conventions, often expressed with communal living, free love, voluntary poverty, and van life, and appreciation for the spirituality and the arts. Cosmicism is a retrospective term for the literary philosophy of types like H.P. Lovecraft. This literary philosophy is characterized by human fear of insignificance, the terror of meaninglessness, and a fear of the cosmic void, often characterized by horror, aliens, demons, occult phenomena, and dreamy narratives. Jack married twice, once to Elizabeth Bessie Moderne, who was part of his social circle. His first marriage to Bessie was more for friendship, mutual advantage, and comfort. The two shared a love for wandering, taking photos, and developing photos. They would have 2 children together, Joan and Becky London. This marriage would end in 1903, the same year London became famous and the same year he met Charmaine Kittredge, as Charmaine nursed him back to health after a fall. Regarding this controversy, George Sterling quoted Jack as confiding in him, "Bessie is devoted to purity. Every time I come back after being away from home for a night, she won't let me be in the same room with her if she can help it." Of course, the implication in Sterling's gossip here regarding his friend's divorce could be baseless suspicion of a jealous wife, a mistress Charmaine, or even prostitutes and venereal diseases. His second marriage was more for passion with Charmaine Kittredge. They shared similar socialist and bohemian values and shared a more sexual, physical passion. They did attempt to have children, but sadly one child did not survive birth and another died in pregnancy. Jack and Charmaine stayed married for life. There is a patience of the wild, dogged, tireless, persistent as life itself, that holds motionless for endless hours the spider in its web, the snake in its coils, the panther in its ambuscade. This patience belongs peculiarly to life when it hunts its living food, and it belonged to Buck as he clung to the flank of the herd, retarding to its march, irritating the young bulls, worrying the cows with their half-grown calves, and driving the wounded bull mad with helpless rage. For half a day this continued. Buck multiplied himself, attacking from all sides, enveloping the herd in a whirlwind of menace, cutting out his victim as fast as it could rejoin its mates, wearing out the patience of creatures preyed upon, which is a lesser patience than that of creatures preying. There were multiple accusations of plagiarism made against London. These accusations included his works Iron Heel and Call of the Wild. Jack denied plagiarism accusations, but admitted that expression came more easily to him than invention of something out of nothing. He would often purchase plots from other authors to alter and make his own, or else he would use incidents from newspaper clippings as his base material to shape. In fact, he said that Call of the Wild was inspired by his reading of My Dogs in the Northland 1902 by Egertson Ryerson Young. Egertson Young was a Canadian teacher, Methodist missionary, lecturer, and author. My Dogs of the Northland was the prototype and chief inspiration for London's novel. Young was certified as a teacher in 1860 and taught for 3 years before pivoting into the priesthood. Egertson married Elizabeth Bingham in 1867. They had 5 children. They would depart for Red River to start missionary work amongst the Indian Cree, a North American indigenous people in Canada. Young would write 16 books. Here is an excerpt from My Dogs in the Northland. Quite fairly, Jack, Egertson's dog, was a privileged character among the dogs, for he and Cuffy always slept close to me in the camp on the outside of my robes. When the men began harnessing up their trains, it was soon seen which dogs were missing. An honest effort was generally made by the men to capture them, before they would appeal to me for Jack to come to their help. When, however, it was seen that some were still undiscovered, Jack was set speedily to work. All I had to do was show him one of the empty collars and tell him to go and find the dog that had the head that ought to be in it. One good smell at it was all that he required, and then he was off with a rush. Round and round the camp he would go until he struck the trail of the dog for which he was searching. When this was found, a joyous bark gave us the news that he was on the right scent, and it would not be long before the truant dog would be driven into the camp. So every night after my camp bed was made and I was snugly tucked in my loyal and most attentive Indians, Jack quickly stretched out of his great body at my back, while Cuffy preferred to cradle down on the robes at my feet. Doubtless she selected this place as generally a great blazing fire was burning not far from my feet, although at times the nights were so bitterly cold that I used to think that I was really freezing to death. London died at age 40 on November 22, 1916, in a sleeping porch in a cottage on his ranch. At the time of his death, he was suffering from dysentery, late-stage alcoholism, and uremia. He was in extreme pain and taking morphine and opium. Jack had suffered from many hardships and diseases from his travels in snowy and tropical places. Even until the end, he never stopped working on his ranch, never stopped writing and fighting, living life to the full. Jack London's life was characterized by a deep appreciation for the wild places, animals, and pioneering adventures. His life was marked by an angry, wolf-like ambition and a dogged stubbornness to achieve total victory in the literary world. Jack London made his mark and won the victory, and he left a valuable legacy. In 1918, the Massachusetts Society for the Prevention of Cruelty of Animals teamed up with the American Humane Education Society to create the Jack London Club, which sought to inform the public about cruelty to animals and to advocate for animal rights. There is a mountain, a lake, and a postage stamp named in his honor. Films featuring him include the 1943 film Jack London, the 1980 film Klondike Fever, and the Call of the Wild films from 1935 and 2020. But he is not always alone. When the long winter nights come on and the wolves follow their meat into the lower valleys, he may be seen running at the head of the pack through the pale moonlight or glimmering borealis, leaping gigantic above his fellows, a great throat a bellow as he sings a song of the younger world, which is the song of the pack.